Viewers, Assalamu alaikum. You're watching PTV World, and I'm Fahim Bangish with our MUHRRAM special program on Karbala on MUHRRAM. Every year we see MUHRRAM coming. Every year we see clouds of tragedy permeating each and every city of the world, not just the country, of the world. Why? Because this was the biggest tragedy that the world ever saw. This was the biggest tragedy that the history of Islam ever saw. Today, to discuss the philosophy of Karbala, to discuss the spirit of Karbala, we will be talking to Professor Dr. Anis Ahmed, who's here with us on Skype. Professor Dr. Anis Ahmed is Vice Chancellor, Rifa International University, and he's also a researcher and a scholar, very well renowned, of course. Professor Sir, welcome to PTV World.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, sir. Now, sir, we are here discussing the spirit of Karbala. We discuss this every year. First of all, I'd like to know from you, what does Karbala actually mean to you, and what should it mean to an average Muslim?
Well, Karbala stands for an extremely important event in our history, and particularly it relates with an event that was epoch-making. Imam Hussein's martyrdom was not just a political act, but it had a huge background. And Imam Sahib did not just respond to it without much thinking, but he knew very well that a total system was being changed, and that's why he came forward to oppose it and to fight for what he thought was the proper Islamic system. Very briefly, if I may say that the first important aspect that struck him was that if Khilafat, which was essentially a matter of not only political leadership, but a leadership of Muslim Ummah in terms of knowledge, in terms of taqwa, piety, in terms of administrative capacity, in terms of endorsement of people. In brief, a transition or change from Khilafat to a hereditary succession, in his view, was extremely crucial. And therefore, he felt that if we allow this process of change, then the whole Islamic system will be affected. Therefore, Imam Sahib was the person who took lead, who decided to come forward and sacrifice not only his life, but his dear ones. And with him, over 70 persons joined in making that sacrifice. And that's what makes this event extremely important in our history.
Absolutely, you are right. It definitely was the biggest tragedy. Now, also, we see what we see in Karbala is the spirit, is that feeling that no matter how much pressure you have to stand upright in the face of tyranny, in the face of oppression, if you are indeed at the truth. What do you say about that?
Well, very briefly, the way I look at it is that Imam Sahib presented an ideal of not only patience, not only constancy, but also a matter of making no compromise when it's a issue of truth and falsehood. And the whole message of the event is that the truth cannot be compromised. The Quran in many places has said that haqq or right is something which cannot be replaced with all those aspects that exist in society. So the first important aspect which I see is that he stood for truth and considered that no compromise can be made on principles.
Also, sir, if we relate it to today's circumstances and today's everything political, administrative, which is happening around the world, how can we connect Karbala to what's happening in today's time?
Well, the fact of the matter is, we, because of our human mind and knowledge classifications, we divide things in which are political, cultural, religious, social, economic, and so on and so forth. But I think the basic question that Imam Sahib faced was, if Islam means acceptance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the authority, which means Tawheed and Hakimiyya or sovereignty, then lawmaking, deciding what is right and wrong, is not a matter of a parliament, an individual, or a group of people. It has to be done based on two non-variables: what the Quran says, what
Hmm.
Prophet Sunnah tells us. If any system goes beyond that, deviates from that, then it is a denial of Islamic spirit. Therefore, it was not just a political change or political challenge. It was a challenge of a system. The system that Islam provided in the Quran and Sunnah and in the practice of Khulafa Rashidin was that a person who is not linked in terms of family, not a succession by way of blood relation, but capacity. Capacity defined in terms of the person who is most knowledgeable, the person whose character and behavior is known to people, and who enjoys their trust. The trust is indicated by way of bay'ah, pledge. And then at the same time, the person who is fully aware of the custodianship, trusteeship of this great responsibility. All these aspects put together were at stake. And therefore, when Imam Hussain came up with the opposition of that system, it was not an individual confrontation. It was not between two persons. It's not something personal. It was a matter of principle, as in the beginning, that he decided not to make any compromise on principles. Unfortunately, as you said in your comment, nowadays what we see is that we have become more victims of pragmatism.
True.
We consider our short term gains and goals more than the ultimate objective. Imam Sahib had the ultimate objective, because a shaheed for truth is one who is welcomed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in paradise. But a person who is looking for short term goals, his own power, his own authority, his own glamour, may have all that, but ultimately this person will be the loser. So, though in worldly terms we can say that he was martyred, but that martyrdom became part of a culture, a tradition, a pride of a nation, while the other behavior of trying to deviate from the Quranic and Sunnah approach of governance was never approved by the conscience of the Muslim community.
Right, sir. And also, it also relates to many of the Sufi people who later on came and said that in the end of times there will be a qahtur rijal, as in there will be a shortage of people who would speak the truth, who would die for truth. Do you think this is that time?
Well, it's a common understanding, but I differ with that. I believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this world with a plan. And that plan is that truth must prevail. And truth prevails not by quantity, but by quality.
Right.
The Quran itself says that if you are just 20 believers, you are bound to overcome 200, which means a proportion of 1 to 10. If there are 10 good persons, then they are bound to impact on over 100 persons. Therefore, the concept of Fatur Rijal that we have very few leaders, we have very few community people. I do not buy that idea at all. I believe that every single human being Allah has been created in good form. Ahsan
Right.
taqweem is a Quranic term. And at the same time, since it was said right in the beginning that I'm going to make my Khalifa, then naturally a Khalifa cannot be incompetent person. Khalifa means someone who is competent, qualified, but the matter is how much you enhance this person to improve and ultimately prove worthy of doing a job. This enhancement is missing. I can tell with all confidence that even among my students in my lifetime, I have found thousands of them much better than the so-called TV stars and singers and people who claim to be leaders in so-called showbiz. These are persons. We have over 67% youth in our country who are talented, who, if properly groomed, each one can be a leader. We don't have dearth of leaders, but we have dearth of planning, dearth of thinking, dearth of pain, dearth of concern. And yet I believe that if we move in proper direction, then this country can provide richest resource of human beings to the world. I am a witness of that. I was teaching in America for quite some time, and I know that on campuses as well as in institutions like NASA and many places, it was Muslim scientists who were running institutions. Hospitals were run by Muslim medical doctors. If you withdraw that human resource of Muslim countries, and particularly from Pakistan, then those hospitals collapse. Therefore, we have resources, but we are experts in misuse of resources. We are experts in destroying nature. We are experts in never acting rationally. So if we act rationally and if we look on things properly, I'm confident that there will never be a dearth of leadership talent in our country or elsewhere.
That's quite true, sir. Now, also, in today's world, not just today's world, in the earlier centuries as well, we have been seeing, as far as religion is concerned, we've been seeing Muslim fighting among Muslims, among their brothers and sisters, for the sake of power. Doesn't that go against the spirit of Karbala?
Definitely, it goes against the spirit of Karbala. Islam wants brotherhood or ukhuwah, concern for the other person. The Prophet has said that a Muslim cannot harm the other Muslim by his hand nor by tongue. And therefore, Islam visualizes a society where you have love, tolerance, compassion, forgiveness, space for everyone. Nevertheless, if we don't follow Islamic teachings, what will happen? Definitely, we'll have negative attributes. The very obvious example is in Northern Irish Republic, which claims to be a Christian society, two groups, Catholics and Protestants,
And Protestants,
for
yes.
over 100 years were killing each other. Does it mean Christianity is responsible for it or the persons? Same applies to Islam. If Muslims are not following Quranic teachings, if the education system does not provide them with Quranic teaching, with proper translation, and simple translation, if we do not provide them examples of the Prophet in his home, in his society, everywhere, if we don't provide them with the real heroes of our history, Muslim scientists, Muslim astronomers, Muslim medical doctors, where in our textbooks we find not a chapter but a page on them. We can find something on a lady who did some research in biochemistry in Korea or China, but not in Muslim countries or Muslims. With that approach, do we expect our youngsters will have a hero, will have a vision, will have a aspiration to become like that? It's not a matter of youth, it's a matter of we, the so-called policy planners. the so-called rulers, the so-called persons who think they're educated and they're educating. We don't educate, we just make them robots who know some words or some information, not knowledge at all. So unless we provide Islamic teachings, which means ethical behavior, which means kindness, which means love, sacrifice, humanity, fairness, these are the basic values of Islam. And Imam Sahib wanted this kind of society, not a society which is selfish, self centered, moving around one individual. Therefore, if we want to follow the spirit of Shahadat Hussain, then we have to make sure that our coming generations, our media, our textbooks, our print media, electronic media, all of them are aware of their prime responsibility. We have been listening for centuries that media means education, media means entertainment, media means information, but unfortunately, a crude form of entertainment, which is not entertainment either, but obscenity, has taken over all other functions, and results are obvious.
Also, Professor, you very rightly said that our textbooks are basically about rote learning, and we do not teach our students how to think out of the box. And as a result of that, most of our population, most of our youth, our upcoming generations, they are coming out as literate people and not educated people. And also, it is said that this book, the Quran, is a book without any doubt. The first surah says that. On the other hand, like you very rightly said and pointed out, that we do not teach our young generation the simple translation of the Holy Quran, because this is the book which is for those people who reflect, and we don't teach our students, we don't teach our youngsters how to reflect. So that's very true what you said, that we are bringing up a generation which does not know how to think out of the box, and that is why we see in other traditions, we see in other cultures, people coming up, young people coming up and doing stuff which is revolutionary for the world, but not from the Muslim Ummah. That's really correct. Now, also, don't you think in today's world, where there is so much intolerance, we need to inculcate a spirit of emotional intelligence in people so that they could empathize with other people around them?
Well, you are very much correct. And the fact of the matter is, if you look into the Quran, you will find that it provides nearly equal emphasis to what we call in psychology cognitive intelligence or emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman, an American psychologist, came up with a bestseller with that title. And he tells us that the amygdala, which is a small, uh, like an almond in our brain, a region, that is what controls our emotions and correlates with heart. The Quran tells us that you must use your reason, which means cognitive intelligence. At the same time, it says, "Lahum qulubun la yafqahuna biha." They have hearts, but they don't think with them. Yafqahuna biha. Similarly, it says they have hearts, but they have become like rock. Although some rock may even burst and water may come out of it. Now, all these Quranic statements tell us that neither just amygdala or heart, nor just your so called cognitive intelligence or empirical reality can solve the problem. Human being is to be approached holistically, and that's Islamic approach. Tawheed means holistic way of life. Tawheed means unified life. Tawheed means I should not have two poles, a pole of rationality and a pole of emotionality. I should have only one personality where both converge and where you have what I call ethical intelligence. Islam has given, without using this term, a new concept, revolutionary concept, that you think ethically. Is it halal or haram? When I find some objects which might look to people beautiful, like a statue of Venus, then they call it beauty. But what does it mean beauty? Does beauty mean nudity only or something else? This ethical intelligence tells me, since it is nude, it cannot be beautiful. Therefore, I should not see it. And similarly, if someone is using foul language when in a very musical tone, then should I listen to it? Norms of music tell me, so long the notes are synchronized, listen. But Islamic ethics tells me notes may be marvelous, Mozart being followed, but you have to use your ethical intelligence. Should I listen to what is unethical or reject it? Therefore,
True.
it is not just a matter of what commonly understand by emotional intelligence. I think we have to look on the whole issue from a different perspective. How we can create an ethical community in Pakistan and elsewhere who are aware of those principles which are universal. If Islam says that don't raise your voice, in Surah Al-Hujurat, the Quran says, when you address the Prophet, peace be upon him, your voice should not be raised. When you're walking with him, your feet should not precede him. These are manners, universal manners. How do I walk? How do I talk? How do I eat? How do I think? In other words, Islamic teachings can be summarized in one single word, and that is ethical behavior. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. The Quran said that the Prophet, peace be upon him, you have at the height of morality and ethics and behavior. This is the apogee of ethical conduct and behavior. And that's what is the essence. And that's what Imam Sahib proved by his behavior, that ethics cannot be compromised at the altar of political power, economic power, or any other object. Today, we make compromises at global level in the name of so-called global community, the so-called democratic world, the so-called new world order. All these terms to me boil down to one single thing. We, the Eurocentric people, should be followed in everything, or else you don't deserve to remain in history. Now, that approach has to be properly understood and responded not by hate, not by conflict, but by a very positive behavior of ethical conduct. Islam wants us to develop that ethics of treatment, ethic of thinking, ethics of doing things in most appropriate and proper manner. And that's what I think is missing presently. We are not teaching manners, culture, civilization, knowledge, but giving only information to our students, and results are bound to be not very pleasant.
So, as you very rightly pointed out, that there is a severe dearth of ethical behavior, mannerism, proper morality. But then again, we do see that as people have become more aware due to information technology, due to the overflow of information, that it's become more and more difficult for parents to bring up their children in the right manner. Now, how do you think that that can be addressed? This is a serious problem of today's world. Whereas we did see that ethics and morality, they were at its peak if we consider Ahl Bayt, if we consider Hazrat Imam Hussain and his family.
I think modern technology, digital educational techniques, all have made things more easy, not difficult. Earlier, you needed a grandmother at the bedtime to tell her grandson or granddaughter a story to give ethics and morality. Today, with this small gadget of mobile telephone or iPad or whatever you call it, you can have stories of prophets in every language made available. You can have best narrators, you can have best scenarios, and kids will love. Our problem is we think the whole world of entertainment means Disney World. The whole world of entertainment means Times and Warner. I think this is highly narrow-mindedness, that if Warner Brother has something, then this is something modern. But if we talk about those beautiful stories which Maulana Rom, Maulana Sadi, and many others have provided to us, why those cannot be brought in the most modern technology? Why those people who are experts in making frames, setting proper light, doing proper audio and visual recording, why they cannot use their talent with that material, that substance which is available? Which means that technology is only a servant and masters are those who decide. If we want to have an ethical change, it can come in simple ways of oral communication, conventional education. It also come and perhaps more faster with the new technology. So I believe that technology has its own challenges. It's an addiction, actually, which is a digital addiction that we are facing and more serious than drug addiction. But we can use digital technology very efficiently and very productively if we only have brain, if we only have our priorities set, if we only want to see a good society.
Right, and talking about priority, we do see, if we look at the example of Ahl Bayt, if we look at the example of the one leading Ahl Bayt, we do see a very, very proactive behavior. Proactive in the sense that he knew that if he is going to follow the truth, if he is going to be steadfast on what he believes in, he's going to make it to the end. He's going to make it to the end very, very successfully, having an impact on not just that time, but also the upcoming generations and for all times to come. But we do see a dearth of proactivity these days, don't we?
Well, you see, the example we have is very simple. Not only Imam Hussain, but his whole family sacrificed themselves for a principle. And Imam Sahib knew very well, Hazrat Hussain knew very well that ultimate end will be a conflict and perhaps losing his life.
Right.
But knowing that, he felt that this is worth doing. And I am sure it did work in the same way. Today we remember over a thousand years what took place, and many other great stories of history are never known to people. So he made a mark, an impact on history by following a principle and not bending down, not becoming part of the same environment which was growing and which was providing him a challenge. I think what we need to understand from the example is that we should stand for truth irrespective of whether we are few or many. Secondly, we must try to find out what is truth based on the Quran and Sunnah. And thirdly, we should not go for any self projection or any selfish objective, but objective of the Ummah, objective of saving the image of Islam. Unfortunately, our political, economic, and other activities are focused around individuals and not around principles. What Imam Hussain has provided us as a guiding light is that you should stand for principles, not for an individual projection.
Also, sir, we do see that what Hazrat Imam Hussain believed in, besides the truth, was also simplicity and faqr. But in these days, we do see that people go for grandiosity, grand things, something that they can show off with. And that's also against the spirit of Islam and the spirit of sacrifice. Is that not it?
You know, the environment in which he was brought up and those who gave him concept of piety were who? persons like Prophet, peace be upon him, who had the whole Arabia on his feet, but he was lying down on a mat.
Right.
He was not having an air conditioned office. He
Hmm.
was not traveling in a Mercedes Benz bulletproof BMW. No. A person who is praised 5 times a day by pronouncing his name globally was so humble. Therefore, uh, Hazrat Hussein's upbringing and training was done in that environment. How could he go for glamour? But what is our training? From day one, we find if our children do not go to their school in an air conditioned car, if they are not entertained every evening by so called junk food, if they are not entertained every day by the so called fizzy waters, then they think we are not loving them. I think the problem is from childhood. It is not a matter of when someone is grown up, then he likes grammar, but from childhood, when we educate them and tell them what is right and wrong, that's what becomes their personality. Imam Sahib's personality was raised by the Prophet, peace be upon him, by Hazrat Ali, who was an example of simplicity, sacrifice, by Sayyidah Fatima, who was sacrificed by in personified. All these persons worked to raise him as a ideal person. Now, what is the role of parents in our present society? Do they ever give value time to their children? Or when they are exhausted by the end of the day, then husband and wife come back from their jobs and just go for a, um, um, food which is ordered online, and then they sleep. If this is the lifestyle which we call modern, which we call advanced, which we call gift of civilization of the West, then how can we have those personalities which you were mentioning, very humble, polite, simple? Simplicity is, I think, the most absent phenomena in our society.
That's true. And also talking about modernism, I think Islam is the most modern religion. It's just that we attribute modernism to the West, which is very sad on our part, isn't it?
Well, there is nothing like modernism in the West because West has totally condemned modernity in the name of postmodernity, condemned postmodernity in the name of deconstructionism, rejected all those in the name of existentialism and so on and so forth. West has been rejecting its own idols, breaking those idols every other day, making idols and breaking idols, while Islam has provided what is most suitable, appropriate for human beings in all times to come. If the Quran says, eat whatever is halal and tayyib, which means whatever is good for your health and whatever does not contain anything to harm, then this is a global message. It's not subject to a village or a cosmopolitan society. Islamic principles are simple, workable, beneficial, but unfortunately, we define modernity, as you said, in terms of blind following of whatever is the current in the West, whatever is a vogue there. That's what we do and think we are very modern. A very unpleasant example, but we blame the so-called pre-Islamic Arabs of making tawaf of Kaaba without dress, but we never blame thousands of people on the beaches of Spain and San Diego, but call them civilized. Is this word civilization means anything to us then? What's modernity? If this is what is they are doing in San Diego Beach, modernity, and what Arab Islamic Arab are doing, same thing, that becomes something they call tribal and heathen and this becomes modern. This is a mockery of words. Therefore, what Islam has given us cannot be interpreted in terms of Western modernity, but what I was saying, that it is the most appropriate, most suitable, most natural, most simple way of doing things. At the same time, it invites us to further investigate and come up with modern solutions of modern problems.
Right, and also, sir, we do see in today's world oppression at different levels. Oppression at home, oppression at workplace, oppression by people richer than us, oppression by countries richer than us. And how can the model of Hazrat Imam Hussain to fight oppression be applied to us Muslims in every angle of our lives?
I think what Imam Sahab did, fighting against oppression, injustice, exploitation, is taking place in history continuously. The so called Arab Spring was an expression of rebellion of people against oppression. The so many situations that exist today in the world, even in the West, are an example of people getting tired of oppression. The rejection of a number of policies by people of the same country is an expression. Therefore, what Imam Sahab did is a living example for not only Muslims but for the whole of humanity, that we should not make compromise with oppressive regimes, with oppressive systems, with exploitative systems, and come up with a more human and humane, more meaningful and peaceful, more conducive environment in which humanity and principles of the Quran and Sunnah can be applied in their perfect form.
No, absolutely, absolutely, you're right. And because we do see in today's world, in places like Kashmir, in places like Palestine, where we do see since decades there has been oppression, since decades there have been killings, and people have been rising against this oppression, against this injustice. And yet, and we do see that that spirit of Karbala, that spirit of Hazrat Imam Hussain strengthening with each passing year, because we do see that people are not being allowed to congregate for the majalis in MUHRRAM in Kashmir. We do see similar things happening in Palestine and other parts of the world as well. But we do see that this spirit keeps on strengthening with each passing year. Is that so, sir? Do you agree with that?
I fully agree with you, and the very bold example of our brothers and sisters in Indian occupied Kashmir is an evidence to it. They don't have Kalashnikovs, they don't have tanks, they don't have any F-16s. They only have their very simple and fragile bodies. Yet they stand against tyranny of India. They stand against all that oppression under which they are going for over 70 years. And they have been locked down for over a year. We were locked down just for a few months, and we were tired of it. People uh, became amok. But look how patient they are, how confident they are, how are they showing an example of istiqamah, steadfastness on their faith. I think this is what is the message of Shahadat Hussain. His martyrdom is an example that you should not be afraid of the tyranny, of the terror of the people, but you should stand firm and have full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to resolve those issues and will provide within our own selves an unsurmountable force which can conquer all those difficulties which we are facing today.
Absolutely, sir. It's indeed an unsurmountable force if it's present within us. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Anis Ahmed, for giving us your time and your insight as far as the spirit of Karbala is concerned, as far as today's era is concerned. Jazakallah, and thank you very much.
Thank,
This was Professor Dr.
thank you.
Anis Ahmed, Vice Chancellor, Rifa International University, a renowned researcher and scholar who was with us on Skype and talking about the spirit of Karbala. The spirit of Karbala is about patience. It's about tolerance. It's about standing up for truth. It's about being as patient as possible, as tolerant as possible in the face of oppression. And in all times which have passed, today is the era in which we need it the most, because today's era is the era in which we have the maximum intolerance in the world, be it racial intolerance, religious intolerance, any sort. We do see it at the domestic level, we see it at the intercity level, we see it at the provincial level, country level, international level. It's there at all levels. And that spirit of Karbala has to be inculcated in all levels, because we do see that it's not only appreciated by the Muslims all around the world. The spirit of Karbala, the sacrifice of Ahl Bayt, sacrifice of Hazrat Imam Hussain alayhi salam, is appreciated by not just the Muslims all over the world, but also non-Muslims. People from all religions, they idolize this. They take him as the idol of patience, of tolerance, of truth. And that tells us that no matter what happens, you should never compromise on truth. You should never compromise on your ethics, your beliefs, and your values. This is Fahim Bangish signing off. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.